Montana Territory, June 1873. The wind came down off the crazy mountains like it had somewhere to be, and Marabeth Coyle pressed closer to the rock face, eyes darting toward the darkening sky. Her stomach clawed at her ribs. She had not eaten since the morning before. 2 days ago she had run. No plan, no food, just her boots, the clothes on her back, and a bruised arm from where her late husband's brother had shoved her into the feed bins when she refused him. Now she was alone, hungry, and afraid, crouched in the dust behind a boulder as hoofbeats echoed down the trail. She should have stayed hidden, should have let them pass. But her legs gave out under her and the rock scraped her shoulder as she tipped sideways. The rider reined in fast. "Whoa there!" a voice called. "Low, steady. You hurt." Marabeth blinked up at him. A man in a worn brown hat sat astride a buckskin gelding. His eyes were the color of dry wheat and held still like he did not scare easy. He dismounted slow, hands up. "I am not going to touch you," he said, crouching a few paces away. "Name's Paxton Hale. You look like you need food and a place to sit that is not a rock." She tried to lift her chin, but tears welled up instead. "I ran from my husband's kin. He died last winter. They took everything. I have nowhere." Paxton's mouth tightened. He nodded once, stood, and walked back to his horse. From a saddlebag he pulled a half loaf of bread and a strip of dried venison. He set them down on a flat rock between them. "I will sit over here," he said, easing down with his back to the trail, giving her space. "Eat." Her hands trembled as she reached for the bread. She ate in silence, the crust scratching her throat, but she did not care. When she finished, she whispered, "Thank you." He looked over. "You got a name?" "Marabeth Coyle." He nodded again. "Well, Marabeth Coyle, you can ride with me. I got a ranch about 10 miles west. You can rest there, take a bath, eat something warm. No one will touch you. I give my word." She hesitated. "Why would you help me?" "Because I would want someone to help my sister if she was out here like this." He stood and offered his hand. "Come on. We can get there by sundown if we ride steady." She stared at his hand. Then slowly she took it. His ranch sat low in a valley, tucked between rows of cottonwoods and a stream. It was not big, but it was clean and quiet. The fence posts were straight, and the barn roof was patched but solid. A small house stood square and white, the porch swept and the windows clear. Marabeth sat at his kitchen table, the first real roof over her head in weeks. She watched as Paxton stirred something on the stove. "Beef stew," he said. She believed him. The smell made her stomach tighten again. "I do not have much," he said, glancing over his shoulder. "But the food is honest. You can sleep in the loft tonight. I will be in the barn." She frowned. "You are giving me your house? I am giving you peace." He ladled stew into a bowl and set it on the table in front of her. She stared at it. Her throat thickened. "I cannot pay you." He pulled out the chair across from her and Saturday. "I am not asking for payment." She picked up the spoon. Her fingers shook. Paxton leaned back, watching her eat. He did not speak again for a long while. When she finished, he stood and took her bowl. "I will fix the loft up with blankets," he said. "Then I will bring in more wood. You rest." Marabeth nodded. Her eyes burned. She had not felt safe in over a year. Not since before her husband drank himself mean. She stood slow, fingers brushing the edge of the table. "You really will sleep in the barn?" He smiled faintly. "I have done it before." "Thank you," she said again, her voice raw. He paused at the door. "You look like someone who has been holding their breath a long time, Marabeth. Maybe now you can let it out." She stood there after he left, staring at the table. Her hands curled around the edge. She had not cried in front of anyone in years. But now, in the quiet of that kitchen, she did. Over the next 3 days, she rested. She mended the hem of her only dress. She helped sweep out the barn and folded clean linens by the wash basin. She did not ask to stay, but Paxton never asked her to leave. He brought her breakfast on the 4th morning: eggs, coffee, a biscuit with plum jam. Set it on the table and sat beside her like he belonged there. "You always live alone?" she asked, watching him sip his coffee. "Since my father passed," he said. "Left me the place. Never married." She hesitated. "Me neither. Not really. I was 16 when my folks handed me off to Henry Coyle. Said he had land. He had fists." Paxton's jaw moved once, but he did not speak. "I stayed because folks said widows had no place out here." He looked at her. "You have a place now." Her heart beat hard. "Is this charity?" "No," he said. "It is a table. And I wanted you at it." She stared down at her mug, then up at him. "Why?" "Because you are brave. You walked away even when it cost you everything. That means something." She blinked fast. "You do not know me. I know how you eat slow, like you are afraid it will be your last meal. I know you fold your hands after you finish, like you are waiting to be told to go. And I know I do not want you to leave." Her breath caught. Paxton stood. "I will be out fixing the fence line if you need me." She watched him go, hands tight in her lap. She was not used to kindness. But it was growing here, between eggs and firewood, between 2 chairs at a table where no one raised their voice. For now she stayed, because for the first time in her life no one made her feel small. And when she lay down in the loft that night, she dreamed of a quiet man with wheat-colored eyes, who filled her table and sat beside her in peace. The calf bawled once, sharp and high, its leg caught between 2 splintered rails near the far fence line. Paxton was already halfway across the field by the time Marabeth spotted it from the porch, his long strides carrying him through the waist-high grass. She set aside the apron she'd been hemming and followed, boots sinking into soft soil still damp from the night's rain. By the time she reached him, he'd gentled the calf with a hand on its flank, murmuring something low as he levered the broken slat free. The animal limped off into the grass, and Paxton straightened, wiping his palms on his trousers. "You didn't have to come running," he said as she reached him, breath still easy despite the work. "I wanted to see if it was hurt," she said, brushing hair back from her face. "I used to help with birthing back home. Not just cattle. Hogs, goats. My father said I had a steady hand." Paxton looked at her, then not startled, just seeing her with some new understanding. "That kind of work's not for the faint-hearted." "I never had time to be faint-hearted," she said, and then quieter. "But I miss the feeling of being useful." He nodded toward the barn. "If you've got the mind for it, I could use another pair of hands come branding time. It's hard work, but you'd be more than capable." She didn't answer right away, just followed him back through the field, her skirts brushing grass still tipped with dew. Near the barn, she paused. "Do you ever get lonely out here?" she asked, voice low. Paxton untied the barn door latch. "Sometimes. But I'd rather be alone with the quiet than crowded by people who don't mean what they say." "I know what that feels like," she said. He looked at her, eyes steady. "You don't have to prove anything to be wanted here, Marabeth." She couldn't speak. Instead, she helped him muck out the stalls, her hands blistering before midday. He handed her a pair of worn gloves without comment and showed her how to shift the pitchfork to save her wrists. That evening, after the sun dropped low behind the cottonwoods, she lingered by the creek behind the house, sleeves rolled past her elbows. The water ran cold but clean. She let it flow over her hands, watching the current spin leaves in slow circles. Paxton came and crouched beside her, boots crunching softly on the gravel bank. "You always this quiet at the end of the day?" he asked. I used to talk too much, she said. Then I learned to hold my tongue. He shook his head. I think maybe you were just waiting for someone who listened right. She looked over at him, the wind tugging a loose strand of hair across her cheek. He reached, slow, and tucked it behind her ear. His fingers brushed her skin, rough and warm. I don't want to be a burden, she said. You're not, he said. You're a presence. That's different. She didn't flinch away when he sat beside her. They watched the water until the light faded. He didn't touch her again, and she didn't move away. Inside, she lit the lamp and set 2 plates on the table. He brought in a bowl of early peas from the garden, and they ate with the windows open to the night air. Afterward, she washed the dishes while he dried them, their hands moving in easy rhythm. When the last plate was stacked, she turned to him, something steady in her chest. I think I'd like to stay, she said, voice quiet but sure. He didn't smile, just nodded once. Then stay. She watched him gather the lamp and carry it toward the stairs, the light swinging gently in his hand. She went to the loft without a word, but her heart no longer beat out of rhythm. She had not been given anything with expectation, only space and respect, and the chance to return something of herself, not because she had to but because someone wanted her whole. That night, the wind shifted through the cottonwoods, and she listened to it without fear. The branding iron hissed when it hit the hide, smoke curling into the sharp air like a living thing. Marabeth stood beside the fire pit, her braid damp with sweat and shirt clinging at her back, but her grip on the branding tongs held steady. Across the corral, Paxton nodded once before turning back to the next calf. The sun had swung high and hard that day, casting long shadows across the dry earth. She hadn't asked to be part of the crew, but Paxton had laid a hand on her shoulder that morning and said, "You've got a place here if you want it." And she had nodded, just once, and tied her hair back tight. Now her arms ached and her throat rasped from dust, but her heart beat even, not frantic, not hollow. When the last calf stumbled off into the pasture, Paxton pulled off his gloves and walked toward her. His shirt stuck to his chest, stained through with sweat and soot. He looked down at her hands, red-ringed and blistered. "You'll feel that tomorrow," he said, voice low. "I feel it now," she said, and surprised herself with a laugh. He smiled not wide, but quiet, the kind that settled under the skin. "Come on. I've got something for sore hands." She followed him to the back porch, where he pulled a small tin from a crate near the door. He opened it, revealing a thick salve the color of old ivory. "My mother used to make it," he said, dipping 2 fingers in. "Lamb tallow, pine gum, and something she never told me." He held out the tin, but she hesitated. "I can do it if you like. Won't hurt." She nodded, and he took her right hand gently, his thumb supporting her wrist as he worked the salve into the raw places. His touch was careful, never lingering too long, but she felt her breath catch all the same. "You ever think about leaving?" she asked, eyes fixed on his hands. "I did once," he said, rubbing the balm along her palm. "Right after Pa died. Thought maybe I'd head down to Wyoming Territory, take up freighting. But I had a colt born that spring. Needed me. And it didn't feel right, turning my back on land that fed me." "You think you'll always stay?" she asked. He looked up at her then. "I might, if there's reason enough." She said nothing. He moved to her other hand, the silence between them not sharp, but settling. When he finished, he closed the tin and stood. "I'll heat water for washing. You want the porch or the creek?" "Porch," she said. "I'm too tired to walk." Later, she sat on the steps in her shift, hair loose and damp. The basin beside her steamed faintly in the cool dusk, and she let her feet soak as she watched the sky turn the color of river stone. Paxton stepped out with a plate in hand. Fresh cornbread, sliced thick, and a dollop of honey set on a wooden slab. He held it out without a word. She took it. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to," he said. She broke off a piece and chewed slowly, eyes still on the horizon. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" he asked, easing down beside her, his hat in his lap. "Someone who'd ask for things in return," she said. "Someone who'd think kindness came with a price." He didn't answer right away. Then, softly, "I'm not owed anything. You came here with nothing but your name and your spine. That's more than most bring." The wind stirred the grass beyond the fence line, and a cottonwood leaf fluttered down at her feet. "I used to think quiet meant danger," she said. "Now I think maybe it means peace if you choose it." Paxton looked at her, eyes steady. "Then let's choose it." She turned toward him, the last of the light casting his face in soft shadow. She didn't speak, but she didn't look away. He reached over, slow, and took her hand not to lead or claim, just to hold. She let him. The night deepened, and neither of them moved, the plate of cornbread resting between them, untouched. In that small, still moment, she felt full in a way hunger had never touched. The soil in the high garden held tight to water, and Marabeth knelt in it with her skirts hitched past her knees, dirt packed beneath her nails. The rows were straight, the beans climbing slow, and the squash already showing yellow at the bellies. She pressed her palm to the warm earth and let her breath ease. Paxton was mending the gate post beyond the fence, hammer ringing out now and again. She could see him through the cottonwoods, his back bent to the task, shirt sleeves rolled to the elbow. He hadn't spoken much that morning, but she'd seen the way his eyes lingered on the porch where she'd left her shawl folded, neat, as if it belonged there. She stood and brushed the dirt from her hands, then walked toward the barn, where the small coop sat shaded beneath the eaves. The hens had taken to her early, maybe sensing she moved with quiet steps and didn't startle easy. She gathered the eggs in the crook of her arm, counting 7, still warm. When she turned, Paxton was leaning against the barn door, one shoulder pressed to the frame. His hat was off, hair damp at the temples. "You always work before breakfast?" he asked. She set the eggs in a basket near the porch. "I like earning the meal." He stepped down from the barn and met her halfway. "I've been thinking about the west pasture. The grass is running low. Might be time to move the herd toward the creek bend." She tilted her head. "You want help riding the line?" "I'd like the company," he said. The gelding stood saddled by the hitch post, and she mounted without waiting, swinging into the saddle with a practiced ease she hadn't spoken of before. Paxton watched her settle the reins, then swung up beside her. They rode without talk at first, the hooves muffled by dry ground and the sky overhead pale with heat. Cottonwoods gave way to open land, and a hawk spiraled once before drifting south. At the bend, they dismounted. Paxton moved to check the cattle trail, crouching by a stretch of hoofprints. Marabeth stepped to the water's edge, where the stream ran slow and clear over polished stones. She cupped a handful and drank. "They'll do fine here," he said, standing. She wiped her mouth on her sleeve. "You always think ahead like this?" He nodded once. "Ranch doesn't run itself, but it's easier now having another set of eyes." Her gaze met his. "You trust me with that?" "I trust you with more than that," he said. The words dropped quiet between them, not heavy but certain. He walked back to the horses, began checking the girth straps. She followed, her hands at her sides, fingers brushing her skirts. "You ever think about what comes next?" she asked. He looked up. "I think about what's here now. I think about the sound of your boots on the porch and the way you hum when you stir the pot. I think about how I want that to keep happening." Her throat tightened. "I've never had someone want to keep me. I'm not someone, he said. I'm the man who wants to build things with you. Not because I should. Because I do. Marabeth stepped closer. You mean to stay? I mean to make this your home, if you'll have it. She reached for his hand, her palm still rough from work, still healing. I already have. They rode back slow, the sun lowering behind them, casting long shadows across the land they'd tended together. At the porch, she reached for the basket of eggs and turned toward the door. Paxton paused behind her. Marabeth, she turned. I'd like to eat beside you every morning from now on. She nodded, her voice caught in her chest. Then come inside. And he did. The August morning broke warm and dry, the kind of heat that pressed against the ribs with a hush, not a roar. Marabeth stood beside the open kitchen window, tying her hair back with a narrow strip of muslin she'd torn from the hem of an old underskirt. The fabric was soft now, worn by washing and sun. Behind the barn, Paxton's voice carried low across the yard, speaking to the young ranch hand who'd come down from Judith Gap to help with the haying. A boy really no more than 17, but eager and wide-eyed. His name was Ellis, and he'd shown up 3 days past with dust on his boots and a letter of introduction from the town's feed supplier. Paxton had given him space in the hayloft and a fair wage. Marabeth had set an extra plate without being asked. She finished tying the muslin and stepped out onto the porch as Paxton crossed the yard. He carried a small wooden box in one hand, its lid secured with a leather strap. There was sawdust along the side, as though it had been finished just hours before. He stopped 2 paces from her. I made something. She frowned gently. You didn't need to. I wanted to. He unhooked the strap and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a lining of checked cloth, was a set of carving tools, 2 knives, a gouge, and a rounded chisel, all with handles shaped from smooth cedar. She looked up, startled. You said once you used to help your father with woodwork when the weather turned cold. I didn't think you remembered that. I remember everything you've said, he replied. She ran her fingers over the tools, then closed the lid carefully. I could carve you a new yoke this winter, or maybe fix the drawer in the washstand. Sticks. I'd like that. They stood in the quiet for a moment, the kind that didn't press for words. Then she asked, would you come with me to Livingston next week? They're holding the harvest fair. I thought maybe we could go together. I haven't been since I was a girl. I'd be honored, he said. She smiled, the kind that curled at the corner of her mouth without asking permission. That afternoon, Marabeth took Ellis out to the far field to show him how to test the hay for dryness before stacking something her father had taught her the year she turned 13. Paxton watched from the paddock, leaning on the fence rail. He didn't interrupt, didn't hover, just stood with that quiet weight he always carried, like a man who knew what he had and didn't need to shout it. When the sun began to dip behind the ridge, she returned, hands dusty and shoulders streaked with sweat. Paxton was sitting on the porch steps, boots off, a tin cup of water beside him. You teach well, he said as she sat beside him. He listens well. They watched the last of the light fade, the sky bruising slowly into a deep blue. She leaned her shoulder against his, and neither of them moved for a long time. I've been thinking, he said finally, about the fall, about you and me. She turned to look at him. I've got 2 rooms in this house. One's never been used for much but storage and dust. I think it'd be better as a place for a woman who's already made this place hers. She waited, her breath caught between ribs. I want to marry you, Marabeth, not to change anything, just to say it plain. You belong here, and I'd be proud to call you my wife. Her eyes stung, but she didn't look away. I was never asked before. Not really. I'm asking now. Yes, she said, voice tight and full. Yes. They married in the small church at the edge of the valley 3 weeks later, with Ellis standing beside Paxton, and the preacher's wife pinning a borrowed brooch at Marabeth's collar. There was no lace or fuss, just wildflowers from the meadow, and the smell of fresh bread cooling on the stove when they returned home. That night, Paxton lit the lamp in the kitchen and poured 2 mugs of coffee. He handed her one and touched her cheek with the back of his hand. "We're home," he said. She nodded, voice too thick for words. They stood there, each holding the other's gaze, the light between them soft and steady. And later, when the lamp had burned low and the stars pressed close against the roof, they lay side by side, hands clasped between them, and the world outside grew quiet. Years passed, and the land held its rhythm. Ellis stayed on, married a girl from Bozeman, and built a place of his own just across the ridge. The ranch grew, slow and honest, a few more cattle, a second pasture fenced with cedar poles Paxton split by hand. Marabeth carved a cradle one winter, cedar like the tool handles Paxton had made her, and set it beneath the window where the light fell warm in the mornings. Their daughter was born in the spring, her hair the color of river sand, her cry sure and strong. They named her Clara, after Paxton's mother. On warm evenings, Marabeth would sit on the porch steps, Clara asleep in her arms, and Paxton beside her with one hand resting lightly on her knee. They never needed many words, just the sound of chickens settling, the cottonwood stirring, and the slow, steady heart of a life built together. And when people passed by the gate or stopped at the fence to trade news, they knew the white house with the swept porch and the split-rail fence belonged to a man and woman who had chosen each other not in haste or drama, but in quiet, unshakable love. And they never once let go.